Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and today we're going to talk about value. That's right. Everybody's trying to get the best bang for their buck nowadays. Inflation's high, or so I've been told. I don't know. All I know is that fantasy drafts are around the corner, and we're always looking for undervalued players that have the potential to break out in 2024. So to help me go through all of the names that might be on that list, and it's a very short list, mind you, Andrew Erickson, the Undertaker himself, and the man from the Great White North, the FTN's own Chris Meaney. Meaney, it's great to see you, buddy. I always enjoy spending quality time with you. It was so fun to see you in New York last year. And look at you. You are now an engaged man. You're right behind Andrew Erickson. He's getting married. Erickson, any wedding advice here for Chris Meaney that you could lay out there for him?
It's your wallet doesn't love you anymore.
That's it, right?
Wallet's gonna take a hit. Yeah,
yes,
I get that. That's
100%.
Yeah, first check.
All right.
No, I appreciate you guys, man. Always a pleasure to chop it up with you, talk football, and it's my favorite time of the year. And hopefully we see each other again very soon in New York.
Yes, that's what we're all looking forward to, hanging out the three of us again. And because that wedding's going to be very expensive for both of you, it's important we find some value on these players. So we're going to do just that. And remember, you can go to FantasyPros.com to get all of the rankings, the ECR, the latest ADP, everything, including all the amazing articles we've got on strategy. And the draft kit is out, ready to go. It's free. Go check it out at FantasyPros.com. So without further ado, let's get to some of the names on the list. Chris Meaney, why don't you kick us off? Give us a name that you're looking for in the draft right now in 2024 that you think is undervalued and could potentially break out this season.
Yeah, a couple of my players I'm going to talk about are not really breakout candidates, but I do believe they're good values on draft day. I'll just start with the quarterback here in Brock Purdy. Last year, he did break out. I mean, he was quarterback 7 in fantasy points per game, quarterback 6 overall. He's going as quarterback 13, 14 over the past couple weeks in high stakes leagues, NFFC, and best ball leagues. Of course, you got Allen and Hurts and Lamar up at the top, and I'm fine with those guys. You want to address the quarterback position early, even in a single quarterback league, get that rushing upside. It's really nice. CJ Stroud is pushed up to quarterback 3. I saw him as high as pick 27 last week in a draft. This is really, really high. Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, I think these guys are fine in the mid-60s. There's no rushing upside. Anthony Richardson's probably a better pick there, but Tua ahead of Brock in high stakes, awful outdoor schedule when it matters the most for Miami. Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, 2 rookie quarterbacks that are getting drafted over a Brock Purdy. I'm fine with Daniels, the rushing floor there. Caleb Williams is still a lot of unknowns and how that offense is going to look like, but Brock in the 9th and the 10th round, we've seen this, just like Jordan Love last year. He broke out. These guys are going outside the top 10 at the quarterback position. I like to wait. I like to address the quarterback position in the middle rounds. And for Brock Purdy, if you didn't believe 2 years ago, I mean, I think you have to after last season. I mean, he was top 5 in passing yards, 4,200 yards. He was second in completion percentage among quarterbacks of 10 games, just under 70%, 31 touchdowns, third in the NFL, one behind Jordan Love. Only 11 interceptions, cleans the ball up, a league best 9.6 yards per attempt, and another year to work under Kyle Shanahan. There was a lot of question marks this time last season about the elbow, the injury, how healthy was he going to be? They traded Trey Lance. They moved on from him. This is his offense. Another year with Shanahan. And all they did in the draft was draft offensive weapons, whether those guys are going to be a part of this squad this year in terms of fantasy relevance, maybe not, but there's a ton of yak monsters on this team, whether they trade Debo and Ayuk, those guys are still on the squad. They have Super Bowl aspirations. And one thing that we saw a little bit from Purdy towards the end of last season into the playoffs, he can run a bit. You don't expect a lot of it, but there was a couple games though over 40 rushing yards. Maybe that comes into his game a little bit more. He's got the GOAT CMC to the backfield. So I think Brock Purdy's a pretty good value if you're looking to wait at the quarterback position.
I would agree. I think he's undervalued in the single quarterback leagues, but especially in the Superflex format. I would agree he's grossly undervalued. And meaning when looking at the game log too, he did have that really rough game in Cleveland last year at Cleveland. Now we know that was kind of a bloodbath of a game. Some injuries happened in that game too. Also had a terrible performance against Baltimore. Everyone's going to have some down games. But if you think about it, if let's say those 2 games were a little bit more on the average to above average scale, maybe there is another level here statistically where maybe he does cross 4,300 yards or even 4,500 yards if they really open up this offense to him in a third year going forward. Erickson, give me a name on your list. Who do you have for the people that is undervalued and potentially primed for a breakout in 2024?
I'm going with Rachaad White, running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Even though he broke out last year, I think that there's more meat on the bone, I think, for Rachaad White entering year 3. So last year was a touch monster, second in touches per game, second overall with 336 touches, RB5 overall, 14th in points per game, 4th in snap share. So basically, I was all over Rachaad White last year, and it worked out. Like, he was a workhorse running back, and he delivered, 3-down skill set. Great receiver out of the backfield. I think that's underrated about Rachaad White's game, like how great he is as a receiver in this offense. And the naysayers and doubters for Rachaad White will point to, well, his yards per carry is not great. When have we ever cited yards per carry as this be-all statistic where, if his yards per carry is bad, then this guy must be horrible. So for me, it's like, okay, yeah, his yards per carry hasn't been great the last 2 years. But who's been great running behind the Buccaneers offensive line over the last 2 years? Nobody. Nobody has been, because it's not been a good offensive line. So now they've tried to upgrade that. They drafted first round Graham Barton. They improved the interior of the offensive line, and they drafted Oregon's Bucky Irving in the 4th round. So that's a concern of, okay, well, is Rachaad White going to see less touches in the backfield now that they added Bucky Irving? Well, it's possible, but we're not considering enough that, okay, Rachaad White is a young player. He's under 25 years old, and he's entering year 3 where he could improve. Like, why can't he be better than 3.5 yards per carry? Like, you see how explosive he is in the passing game. This isn't a plodding running back. It's more of a style that he runs with. And I think that Liam Cohen coming in as the offensive coordinator, I like that for Rachaad White. I know that's kind of like a doomsday scenario with Baker Mayfield. Oh, he lost Canales. Like, what's going to happen to Baker Mayfield? But, I mean, Liam Cohen came back to the NFL so he could coach Baker Mayfield, Baker Mayfield wasn't just good last year. Like, Baker Mayfield's been good at points during his NFL career. So I'm not going to put it all on Canales that resurged Baker Mayfield's career. I think Cohen is going to have success, and I think this offense is going to have a lot of success. If you look at 2022, right, last time Liam Cohen was the offensive coordinator for the Rams in the NFL, he had me convinced that Cam Akers was good at football. Cam Akers in 2022 led the NFL in rushing yards over the last 6 weeks of the season. Cam Akers has a horrible yards per carry. Who was his offensive coordinator? Liam Cohen. Like, it's true. We have an offensive coordinator coming from the Rams, and why do we love Sean McVay in fantasy? Because it's concentrated offenses. Like, there's 2 or 3 guys that get all the targets, get all the receptions, and I think Rachaad White, when you're looking at the pillar pieces of this Buccaneers offense, like, he's one of those guys. Like, it is Rachaad White, it is Chris Godwin, it is Mike Evans, and that's what the offense is built around. So I like Rachaad White a lot. I mean, he's RB13. Like, again, at one point, figure like, okay, he breaks out in his second year. You're expecting him to be a round 2, round 3 pick. You look up, he's going in like round 5 and round 6 as the RB13. He's young. Like, it'd be different if he was 30 years old. It's like, dead zone back, old, like projected volume. But Rachaad White, I think, is still up and coming. I think we haven't seen everything that he can offer. So for me, I think Rachaad White's undervalued.
Before people, watching get all bent out of shape and, you get into that second bag of Funyuns saying, he already broke out last year. He didn't really break out, Andrew. I think he broke through. He still didn't have 1,000 yards rushing.
Right.
I think there is another level potentially for him. And it's also another year older for some of these wide receivers. So maybe there's a little bit more lean on Rachaad White this year, even than last year potentially in there. So lots of good reasons to invest in Rachaad White. And one of our recent drafts, you go back and watch over on the YouTube channel, I took him as my first running back after taking what I usually do, which is a bunch of wide receivers. And I was perfectly content with that. Meaney, give us another name that you're perfectly content with getting that you think is a value that you think could break out in 24.
Yeah, we may touch career highs here. He's not going to catch the rock like Rachaad White, though, I'll tell you that. But Gus Edwards here as RB40 going in the 9th and the 10th round of drafts. I do expect him to kind of creep up a little bit higher when we get closer to week 1, but not too much higher. Jim Harbaugh was obviously brought in. He wasted no time to bring in Greg Roman as the Chargers OC. These guys were together at Stanford. They were together for 3 years in San Fran. Those Niners teams, the Ravens teams under Roman, they ran the football a lot and they ran the football well. And that's what I fully expect the Chargers to look like this season. We already know Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett. These guys are all gone. And Roman brought in 2 former Raven backs. One was Gus Edwards. One was J.K. Dobbins. I like J.K. Dobbins. Like everybody else, I want J.K. Dobbins to be on the football field and play. He looked great when he's on the field. It's been a couple years since we've seen that. Drafted Vidal, who, is a guy that I think people should take shots on as well late in your drafts and redraft formats, because there's an opportunity for him, another physical downhill runner like Gus Edwards, but a 6th rounder. They addressed the offensive line in the draft. I feel like they're going to lean on Gus Edwards here. He should be the goal line back. He excelled in that role last year with the Ravens. 700 carries for his career, healthy 4.9 yards per carry, 700 yards in 4 or 5. Those aren't numbers that are going to blow you away, but I feel like he's the perfect hero RB strategy. Like, I like to take wide receivers early and often. Give me a running back in the first couple rounds, and I'll attack the running back position round 6, 7, 8, and 9. He's sitting there for you. He's not going to score 13 touchdowns again, albeit those 13 touchdowns came in the red zone. I mean, no back had more goal line carries than Gus Edwards last year. It was him and Jalen Hurts. These guys forget it was the tush push, right, from Jalen. But Gus Edwards is getting a lot of those touches, and he was successful in that role. So 26th back on average last year over the final few weeks of the season in a half-point setting, not really catching any balls out of the backfield. So again, not going to blow you away with these statistics. You know, career high last year, 198 carries, 810 rushing yards. He can do that. He can get it up to over 200, 220, 230 maybe in this offense, running the rock a lot and maybe flirting with, 900, 950 and 8+ touchdowns. That's going to be flex worthy for you every single week. And again, if you're taking a hero RB strategy to get Gus Edwards as your third, maybe fourth back, I think it's pretty valuable.
Look, Gus Edwards is a guy that I've always, been supportive of. I always like the value of. Now it's not expensive by any stretch of the means, but certainly he's got the first crack at this gig. I find myself, Meaney, drafting a lot of Kamani Vidal late.
Sure.
Would you do? I was just going to ask you, if you are somebody's in on Gus Edwards, would you do that more on principle? I know you hate the handcuff conversation, all that stuff, and I know J.K. Dobbins is kind of the man in the middle, but considering the health track record of both of those guys ahead of Vidal, is Vidal a good late investment if you do get invested in this backfield at all?
Yeah, I think it's fine to handcuff at that point. I mean, it's towards the last couple rounds of your draft, but I think you can just go in the mindset thinking, like, listen, this Chargers team, they want to run the football. I know that he's got Justin Herbert there, but this is going to be a very different offense. It's a very raw and experienced offense with a lot of younger players in it. So if you don't get Gus Edwards, then Vidal is a guy that you can get at the end because, as I mentioned, like, this is going to be an opportunity for him. Even though he's a 6th round pick, the way his profile is, it kind of reminds me of Gus Edwards because he's physical. He's downhill. They want to move the chains that way. That's how he moved the rock in Michigan last year, right? With Corum, like they just short yardage stuff and ran. So I think one of the two. I don't think you have to handcuff, but yeah, if you miss it on Gus, then you get Vidal because it's a pick that's not going to cost you really anything in drafts.
Erickson, who's next on your list?
Looking at Dalton Kincaid, Buffalo Bills tight end. And nice. I think that Kincaid, for me, is someone that we're undervaluing because we're all trying to figure out, who's going to be the Bills wide receiver 1? Oh, well, his name is Dalton Kincaid. He just doesn't wear a wide receiver, like a wide receiver number. Like, he is a tight end. They drafted him in the first round last year. And then what did they do? They got rid of their top 2 receivers because they saw what Dalton Kincaid could do. Like, oh, great. Like, now we can move on from Diggs. We can move on from Gabe Davis. We're going to have a bigger role for Dalton Kincaid. So I get last year as a rookie, tight end 15 points per game, 19 games played, but he had really bad touchdown luck. So he only had 3 touchdowns despite 81 catch. I mean, this tight end caught 81 balls for over 750 yards, and we're looking at, he wasn't Sam Laporta. Like that's the thing with Dalton Kincaid. It's like, well, he wasn't Sam Laporta who scored 10 touchdowns, right? But when you look at, okay, now that Diggs and Gabe Davis are gone from this offense, well, what does that open up? Specifically looking at the red zone. So Kincaid last year had 9 red zone targets. He scored 0 touchdowns on those red zone targets. More than 50% of the receiving touchdowns from the red zone are gone from this offense from Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. Last year, they combined for 26 end zone targets. 26. Where do you think Josh Allen's going to go with the ball? He's going to go to his tight end, Dalton Kincaid, in the end zone. And that's actually interesting. When I was doing this, I was like, is Dawson Knox kind of underrated too? Like, we look at Isaiah Likely, right, as this tight end that, if Mark Andrews goes down, like tight end 1, Isaiah Likely. Isn't Dawson Knox kind of that similar conversation? So again, as another, because Josh Allen loves Dawson Knox in the end zone too.
He does. I think that makes Dawson Knox, I would argue, a bye-week tight end to pick off the waiver wire and plug and play and hope he get the touchdown that week. To me, that's what he is. He's not like a guy you're going after necessarily, or even in a 14-team league. But he is a guy that I think you're targeting, or you're playing DFS, or you're looking for props or things like that for touchdown score. Knox becomes interesting.
Right. But I guess the way that I'm bringing up the Likely comparison is Likely gets drafted in these best ball drafts, right? Because he has that contingent upside, but Dawson Knox doesn't. Like, what's the difference? So that's just something I kind of I had an epiphany about when I was writing up Dalton Kincaid. But again, I still think Kincaid is the guy when it comes to like overall targets. Again, if you're going to finish as the tight end 1 overall, the first step is, can you lead your team in targets? right now, who has a better chance of leading their team in targets? Dalton Kincaid or Sam Laporta? I'm pushing my chips in on
Kincaid.
It's Kincaid, and Josh Allen's his quarterback. So again, he's going as the tight end 5. Tight ends, especially the elite ones this year, are going at a discounted rate than they have in years past because everybody freaked out about Travis Kelce. He's now moved down, and now as a result, everybody else has kind of moved down as well. So I think, again, I love elite tight end this year, and Dalton Kincaid is one of those last elite guys that I could really see having a massive season. I mean, how high do you think he would be going if he was just a wide receiver and not a tight end? Like, I think that he would be going probably much higher. And it's like, I'd rather have the tight end.
Yeah. At Utah, he had back-to-back years, the last 2 years where he
first round pick,
8 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's not like he can't get in the end zone. You know what I mean?
High-end wide receiver 2 or something. I love this pick.
Right.
He's my third tight end off the board. And
well, but Meaney, it's also hard because you have like Keon Coleman you're trying to project, Khalil
right,
Shakir,
exactly.
like you're looking at all these things, and it's so much ifs and buts, whereas Kincaid, I'm like, well, I kind of know what Kincaid is. It's just a matter of year 2 kind of taking the leash off and let him play in the slot, let him do more things, and let him kind of be more of that, multi-purpose weapon. Next guy on your list I love this list of yours, Meaney, because, Gus has been around forever. And the next guy on this list has been around for a long time too. And this is arguably the best quarterback situation he's ever been in.
Yeah, it'll be his 12th different quarterback as he enters year 6 in the NFL.
12?
12. I remember writing in the Black Book a couple years ago when I was doing the NFC East preview on Washington, and I was like, oh, here we go again, another quarterback. Listen, like Alex Smith, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, Jacoby Brissett, Sam Howell, like the list goes on for the quarterbacks that Terry McLaurin has played with. And Jaden Daniels may be the best of the bunch. And in fact, I think he will be. And for whatever reason, he is just pushed down draft boards as wide receiver 32. Nobody wants Terry. I get it. Where's the ceiling with Terry? This guy's had 4 1,000-yard seasons. Nobody cares. Nobody cares at all because he's had 5 or fewer touchdowns in each of those seasons. But now he's got a guy who can get him the football. I actually believe in Cliff Kingsbury as a play caller, not a head coach. I think that teams will have to focus a little bit on the run game because of Daniels. I think we'll see a little bit more from Brian Robinson Jr. Got Eckler out of the backfield as well. There's not a lot there in terms of weapons. Terry's faced top coverage his whole career. He's always faced the top corner. He's been able to surpass that. Like, can we get him 7 or 8 touchdowns? If we can, he's going to be a wide receiver too. He's going to draft around Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Jaden Reed, Deontay Johnson. Like, I'm not really interested in any of those guys from a fantasy standpoint. None of those guys are really going to be the one. Maybe Deontay, but do you really care in Carolina? So I think they'll be able to move the ball a little bit better. Daniels is good for his game. We've seen some wide receiver 21, 22 finishes in around that mid-range with those 5 touchdowns. And I'll give love to Jahan Dotson too. I mean, everybody was in on the breakout last year. It didn't happen, but let's not forget he had 7 touchdowns in 12 games as a rookie. Like, he had more end zone targets in that season than Terry McLaurin, despite playing fewer games. He was running routes and playing as many snaps as everybody else out there, but he just wasn't getting targets, and I don't think that was on him. I don't think he was just phased out of the offense. I think it was more so the quarterback play, a lot of turnovers from Sam Howell as well. So Curtis Samuel is gone. I know they got Ben Sano, who I like as a tight end, but just a rookie, Zach Ertz. So there's an opportunity for these guys, and I think Terry in the mid-30s as a wide receiver, you get this. If you wanted to go wide receiver heavy, you can get this guy as your 4th and still get a Dalton Kincaid in there or a Laporta or another guy that Erickson's going to talk about. That was
what was stunning to me, Meaney, is I'm looking at the board at like the ECR and FantasyPros, and I see McLaurin listed in that wide receiver 3 grouping, basically. And you could argue easily that he is the most accomplished and safest of that group. And maybe Keenan Allen's the only other guy, but again, Keenan Allen also playing with a rookie quarterback, also a little older than Terry McLaurin. So really appealing, I think, in that spot. And man, 12 quarterbacks later. Yeah. I mean, this is an opportunity for him to really maybe finally see what he could be. Maybe there is a superstar level Terry McLaurin we haven't seen yet. Erickson, back to you. And you're all in on the tight ends. You got another one for us.
I do have another one. We do need to get Terry McLaurin one of the, like, that Browns jersey that has all the quarterbacks listed on it, like all their stars. We got to get one for Terry for all of Terry's quarterbacks.
See 15 plus quarterback jerseys / t-shirts in Cleveland. Absolutely, it's my favorite thing to see when I go.
So for me, I'm drafting a lot of Terry McLaurin, and part of the reason why is because I love the Commanders, love Jaden Daniels, and I'm doing a lot in best ball because week 17. Oh, who are they playing? The Atlanta Falcons. So Kyle Pitts for me, tight end 6. Right, guys, let me paint this picture for you. All right, imagine the Falcons, right? They get a quarterback in the offseason, Kirk Cousins, like a pocket passer, immediate upgrade over Desmond Ridder and all the other guys they've had the last 2 years, Marcus Mariota, whatever. And then Kyle Pitts' ADP stays the same from last year. He's tight end 6, going right in the 60s, right around that round 5, 6 turn. So Drake London has like ballooned all the way up to like round 2.
Yeah.
Bijan is basically a top 5 pick overall, which he kind of was already last year. But Kyle Pitts, for some reason, like the emotional damage that this guy has done to fantasy managers over the last 2 years.
It's yours and Derek Brown's fault. I mean, let's be honest, because you guys would not listen to me when I kept telling you Marcus Mariota was going to ruin Kyle Pitts, and everybody else after that was going to ruin Kyle Pitts. And now you're right. Kirk Cousins is there. Hey, in that episode we just did, right? The hot take episode. What was my number one hot take? Kyle Pitts finishes the year as the tight end 1 overall. Do you think that's in the range of outcomes, as Debro likes to say?
I think so. I mean, look at it. I mean, people are drafting Drake London. Like, he can be the wide receiver 1, like up in that range. So why can't Kyle Pitts? Look, I mean, is it a slam dunk that Drake London is the automatic number 1 pass catcher on this offense? You look at their best seasons to date, it's the same. In half PPR, they scored the same amount of points, both their rookie years. 142.9, I think is the exact number. So the way I look at it is I think it's a pretty even split. I think it's more of a coin flip about who's going to have the higher target share in this offense. But Kyle Pitts goes in round 6. And the opportunity cost, right? Like, if you don't draft Drake London, okay, well, then just draft another receiver instead. But like, Kyle Pitts gives you such a significant advantage. Like, if he actually does emerge as that number 1 target on this offense, like, he's a massive win for you in your entire lineup. Whereas Drake London, I mean, he's being drafted like he already broke out with Kirk Cousins in round 2. So like, we could be having this conversation next year where Kyle Pitts is now, now he's a round 2 pick because he had this massive season with Kirk Cousins. So for me, again, he's fully healthy. He's removed from all these injuries. Look, before his injury in his second season, he had a 30% target rate per route run. 30%. Like, this guy is an alpha player. We saw it his rookie year when he actually had a good quarterback in Matt Ryan, and we haven't seen it the last 2 years. But the price is the same. Like, I just think that it's such a great bet to make because I don't even need to sell people on like the price and Kirk Cousins is great. Like, guys, it's the same price it was last year, except the quarterback play is going to be better. Like, buy. So if you were drafting Kyle Pitts last year, you have no reason not to draft him again. Like, that's kind of where I'm staying.
Undervalued. Yeah, like, he is the definition meaning of that right now because, as Erickson said, the quarterback has exponentially gotten better, and yet the price hasn't moved at all. That is a great fantasy football situation.
Yeah, I just want to jump in because I love this call so much, and there's so many people in fantasy, like, if they draft a guy early, they get burned, they just don't want to touch that player again. And like, this offense is going to be very similar to the offense that Kirk Cousins ran in Minnesota last year. I mean, it's the same offense, Sean McVay tree. Like, Zach Robinson comes over and Raheem Morris come over from LA. Kevin O'Connell came over from there as well. It's like TJ Hawkinson. Think about all the targets and how he was using that offense, and Kyle Pitts as well. So I love this call. I actually think he's the much better value than Drake London. I wouldn't be shocked if he had more catches, more targets, more yards. The biggest thing is Arthur Smith is gone. He's gone. Like, there's no more Jonnu Smith stupidness that we saw last year as well inside the red zone. So he's a breakout. He could top what he did as a rookie, and I'm super excited for him and everybody in ATL. Like, Kirk Cousins had more passing touchdowns last year in 8 games than the entire offense had over a full season in Atlanta. So yeah,
and don't forget week 1. It's Kyle Pitts' revenge game against Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, if he's not fueled up for that entire game to be like, dude,
2 scores. Can we bet it now? Can we bet 2 touchdown prop right now?
Can he double his career high in touchdowns in 1 game?
Oh, yes. And you know
what?
Can
he get there?
Erickson, you smell that? It smells like week 1, you and me on the prop show. That's what it smells like right there. We're going to go all in on that. But look, all 3 of us agree on this, and all 3 of us are betting on it. And if you want to place more bets, do it at DraftKings Sportsbook, because we are very close at crowning the NBA champion right now. And the action's heating up on the court right now with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. The DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered every step of the way with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boost, and much, much more. So don't miss a second of the NBA postseason as we crown the champion. Download the DraftKings app now and use that promo code FantasyPros when you download the DraftKings Sportsbook and put in FantasyPros. New customers get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, give us another player, Chris Meaney, that is underappreciated, undervalued, and could potentially break out in 2024. And speaking of old dudes here, because you've had some old dudes on this list, this is the oldest one, I believe. I'm pretty sure.
Oh my goodness. Erickson's players are so much more fun than mine. Zeke is not going to break out. But at RB 43, I am taking this guy every time in the 10th round. Are you kidding me? Like the last couple of years, 3.8 and 3.5 yards per carry. No, like let's not care about that at all. His last season in Dallas, 15 games, he had 231 carries. He split time with Tony Pollard. In those 15 games, he scored 12 touchdowns. Touchdowns are hard to predict, but in this offense, I don't think they will be. Like he is going to be the goal line back in this offense, and Dallas is still going to be one of the better offensive teams in all of football. You see what Tony Pollard did last year. He had 60 red zone rushing attempts, which was the second most, just 3 behind Christian McCaffrey. He had 13 goal line attempts. He converted on 3 of them. He was just not good in that role. Dallas actually missed Zeke last year. And as a short yardage back, as a change of pace for Pollard, who wasn't as efficient despite having more touches and all those things, he wasn't as explosive. He's going to be the goal line back here. And that stuff matters to me. There's not a running back that you can get outside of round 10 that you know is going to be linked to, I don't know, maybe a top 5, top 7 offense again. Dak led the NFL in passing yards. Like he scored a ton of touchdowns. The offense is still going to be good. That you can get outside of round 10 and have that goal line role. So I was looking at, there's 10 backs with 39 plus red zone attempts, 6 had 8 plus touchdowns, 5 had 10 plus touchdowns. So if he gets 40 red zone rushing attempts, like he's going to flirt with 8 or 10. And they just didn't do anything in the draft. It was actually shocking that Dallas didn't do anything. I couldn't believe it. They didn't draft a running back. They just signed Zeke, Royce Freeman, right? Rico Dowdle, Deuce Vaughn doesn't get touches. Like, Zeke is not going to be efficient. And his last season in Dallas, he hardly caught. He had 17 catches, career low for him on 23 targets, but 51 grabs last year. A lot of it was some check down stuff in New England, of course, when Ramondre went down, but he was still catching passes. 47 plus in 5 of his last 6. He's going to catch some passes. He's not going to be the Zeke of old. The numbers are not going to be great, but here are RB strategy. I'll hammer that point home one more time. You can get this guy as your RB3, RB4, heck, your RB5. I took him in round 13 in a draft a couple weeks ago. Not a flashy pick, but somebody that you could just plug in as your RB2 or your flex.
Meaney, I think, again, now the guy watching on the YouTube channel is into the third bag of Funyuns and is now throwing them at the device that they're watching the show.
Now feed me.
Hey, get Zeke Elliott. He's 28 years old. He's break out. But more just break out in terms of rebound into something that's fantasy relevant, because I think we can all throw out last year with the Patriots. God knows Erickson and I would love to throw out everything attached to the Patriots last year. RB40, if you dial it back to 2022 and Zeke gives you 876 rushing yards, which I don't think is an absurd thing to ask for, right? And maybe he gives you double-digit touchdowns like he did in 2021 where he gave you 10. In 22, he gave you 12. So let's scale back the touchdowns, right, a little bit. Let's give him 10. Instead of giving him 1,000 yards back in 2021, let's give him 875, which is where he was before he left Dallas. At RB40, Meaney, that's a pretty good value.
It is. And if you give him those numbers, you give him 800, let's just say he gets 8 touchdowns, and let's say he catches 35, 40 balls. It's a top 30 running back, right? I mean, again, it's not... you're not drafting somebody he's not going to be a difference maker in your team. His RB1 days are completely over. His RB2 days is probably also over.
Yeah, but maybe his days of being fantasy relevant aren't over. Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe that's the point, is like, it's gotten so cheap and so ridiculous, and the need for the team is so glaring. Unless you think Rico Dowdle is going to run away with that job, I don't know what else to tell you. Let's go to another player here on Erickson's list. Erickson, you're going to switch gears here to wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm going back to the Buccaneers. Chris Godwin, currently ranked as wide receiver 35. I can't name 34 wide receivers that are better than Chris Godwin in the NFL. I just can't do it. So for me, that's why I think he's undervalued. Like last year, he led the Buccaneers in catches. He had 91 grabs, over 1,100 yards. Again, the issue was just the touchdowns. Kind of like the Terry McLaurin thing, where the last 2 years, Chris Godwin has just not been able to find the end zone because Mike Evans is the guy there. Like he's been gobbling up all those touchdowns. So when you look at their target share last year, it was pretty split, 23% versus Evans 25%. No player scored fewer touchdowns with more receiving yards than Godwin did. Like, this is a regression 101. Okay, if he's going to get this many receiving yards again, he's going to naturally score more touchdowns. And it's happened the last 2 years. So it's like the impending regression for touchdowns is building and building. And the reason why, again, it goes back to Liam Cohen. Again, a guy I really am excited for in this Buccaneers offense. Look, he's already come out and said he's putting Godwin back into the slot. Last year, Chris Godwin played his lowest slot snap rate since 2018 during the 2023 season. Yeah, very easy for me to say. When you look at Chris Godwin and when he's been a full-time slot player, he's never finished worse than wide receiver 20 overall or in points per game. He has 4 seasons with at least a 65% snap rate. Again, like Liam Cohen's talked about having him be in the Cooper Kupp role in this offense. And like usually when something like that, a coach says that, you usually see a guy's like ADP just skyrocket. It's like, oh my God, like this guy's going to be Cooper Kupp. And then people go crazy. But Chris Godwin, it's like, yeah, nobody cares. Even though Chris Godwin has been a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy football before. And that wasn't even with Tom Brady. Like this guy has done it with Jameis Winston. Can he not do it with Baker Mayfield? I think that he can. Again, he's 28 years old. He's 3 years younger than Mike Evans. He's playing in a contract year. They drafted his potential replacement, Jalen McMillan. So, like, the writing's on the wall. It's like, hey, Godwin's like, put up or show up. Like, this is your chance to potentially cash in as you enter your twilight of your NFL career at age 29. So, for me, I think Chris Godwin is just like, I think he's such a great pick.
Fun fact, he's the same age as Ezekiel Elliott. Did you know that? Did you know?
Oh, wow.
They're both at 28. Look at that. It feels like Zeke's been around forever.
Doesn't ever. Wow.
Doesn't it?
Well,
Like,
Godwin's still just a pup. Yeah, I love the call.
right?
Godwin,
Why does it feel that way? But they're both 28 years old. I'm looking at it right now. And also 3 straight years of Chris Godwin with over 1,000 yards receiving, just pointing that out. Last year, 130 targets. The year before, 142. You're right. That touchdown regression comes back to a little bit of a norm. He gets, 6 this year. It's a very different conversation on Godwin. And I hate agreeing with you sometimes, Erickson, but I am hard pressed. I was thinking as you were talking and probably not listening to too much of what you're saying of how many are there 34 guys better than Chris Godwin? Probably not.
You can do it. I want, if you're watching this right now, I want you to do it. I want to hear the 34 guys that you would think are better than Chris Godwin.
Funyuns in the YouTube is on there right now. Typing away right now, trying to list 34. I'm looking at you, Funyuns. By the way, is that a sponsor of the show? It should be. All right, let's get back to Meaney's list here. Let's get another name off the list here. Going for another wide receiver. Meaney, who do you have?
Yeah, this one's maybe a little bit of a risky pick, and I think it's all baked into the ADP is T. Higgins, right? Because the franchise tag, what does the future hold for T. Higgins in Cincinnati? The Bengals got some dudes to pay. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, one of those guys. And let's be honest about the franchise, right? They're not really known to just hand out money. So I do think I think the future for T. Higgins it's pretty cloudy. Maybe he's on a new team next year, but I expect him to be full go when the Bengals open up this season. So as wide receiver 30, Tank Dell is going ahead of him. I like Tank Dell, but come on, right? Like they got Diggs there, got Nico Collins there, Christian Kirk going ahead of him as well, George Pickens in around that range. I don't mind Pickens, hate the schedule, but this is a guy that's been drafted as a top 20 wide receiver over the past couple of years, and he's had those finishes. Wide receiver 19, 2021, wide receiver 14 in 2022. These are fantasy points per game, and he still has that upside. 12 games last season, career low 9.7 fantasy points per game in a half-point setting, 11.5 and 13 in those 2 previous seasons that I talked about, 1,000 yards in each of them, 100-plus targets, 70-plus grabs in each of them as well. You remember Burrow suffered that calf injury to start the season. He's actually suffered a lot of pre-season injuries that have limited him and the Bengals in terms of their starts, and Burrow wasn't great. Like the first game, T. Higgins had 8 targets. I don't think any of them were catchable. I know he had 0 catches. T had 2 or fewer catches in 4 of his first 5 games. But again, Burrow injury, he was hurt. Now, opposite of Jamar Chase, no Tyler Boyd. Mixon's gone too, 50-plus grabs last year. Mixon's a guy who can catch. I like Jermaine Burton from a dynasty standpoint, but maybe not so much this year. Could be Cap like JSN was last year in Seattle with 2 alphas with the Seahawks. So I think that this pick is it's a min pick in the high-stakes leagues the last 2 weeks. I see the min pick at 51 and the max of 80. You're telling me you can get T. Higgins in the 6th or the 7th round? We know that he can be a wide receiver 2, a low-end wide receiver 2, and we can draft this guy as a wide receiver 3, maybe even a 4 if you're drafting this early because people are trying to figure out what is going to happen with him. I think he's going to play. I think he's going to be on the Bengals. He's going to find a way. He's going to be on the field. He wants to get paid. If he wants to get paid, he's going to have to play football. So T. Higgins for me as wide receiver 30, I think is a pretty solid pick.
You mentioned too, Meaney, what really stands out to me when he said he's a top 20 wide receiver, but he's at ADP of wide receiver 29. That's undervalued. He's got a great quarterback in Joe Burrow who just needs to stay healthy. And when he's healthy, they were back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons with averaging 6.5 touchdowns. This is a guy that is very undervalued. And if, God forbid, anything does happen to Chase, T. Higgins does stand to really put up
absolutely
a larger piece of the pie for that Bengals offense. So I agree. It's so weird, the casual memory of people. Like T. Higgins, it's like the Jalen Waddle conversation I feel like we had yesterday on the show, right? Erickson was like, do we forget already that Jalen Waddle was so good at football because he had a season where he was hurt most of the year?
Right. It's very similar like Godwin, right? Like Erickson just talked about this with Godwin. You have one season without these touchdowns. He's still getting red zone targets. He was one of the most unluckiest player in the red zone in all of football last year. And people just, it's what have you done for me lately, right? Still young, can still give you wide receiver 2 numbers. It's good values.
All right, the next guy on your list, Erickson, I'm convinced is just a guy. Convince me that he's more than that.
All right, well, I'm going to convince you that Joshua Palmer is this year's Nico Collins. That's what I'm going to do. Because first couple of years in the league, what did Nico Collins do to show you that, oh, he was more than just a guy? He was a second-round pick. Like, he had his moments here and there. And that's what Josh Palmer has done 3 years in the league. Like, the thing with Palmer is, the reason I can't seem to quit him is because every time he got the opportunity, when either Keenan Allen or Mike Williams missed games, he stepped up. He produced. Like, and that's not a given. Like, we see receivers get full-time roles all the time and totally flame out. And he was behind like 2 really strong receivers. So again, is anyone expecting a third-round pick to like, oh, well, he didn't beat out Keenan Allen or Mike Williams? Like, most guys won't. Like, those are good receivers. And what do? They moved on from both those guys. And Joshua Palmer has the most chemistry with any receiver on the Chargers, any pass catcher on the Chargers with Justin Herbert, who we have seen fuel fantasy wide receiver ones. Last year, before his injury, Josh Palmer was on pace for 72 catches and nearly 1,200 receiving yards. Like, that was real. He could have broke out last year had he not suffered a knee injury. Like, it was going to happen. Like, he's had games with over 100 yards, like the last 2 seasons, because guys have missed time, and he's been able to fill in, either playing in the slot, either playing outside. So, for me, Josh Palmer, for the most of his career, he's really been a jack. Like, that's really what he's been. But he has a primed opportunity for him to step up and be the number 1 receiver on the Chargers offense. Like, what if Ladd McConkey's just not good? Like, he's a rookie, right?
How dare you? How dare you say those kind of words to me on this show?
It's totally possible. Like, he could just not be that good. And when you look at Ladd McConkey, right, the reports at OTAs, he's going to be their starting slot receiver. Okay, great. So what does that mean when they do 2 tight end sets that Harbaugh absolutely loves, that Greg Roman loves? Does that mean Ladd McConkey's not on the field? In 12 personnel, you get 2 outside receivers.
Ladd McConkey, that I'll give you for sure.
And
that I agree with.
And again, you look at Josh Palmer, what is his build? 6'1", 215, red zone guy. Like, at Tennessee, right? This is going back to his college days. He was an end zone monster. Like, he got a ton of end zone targets. And obviously he hasn't gotten that the last 2 years because of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. But are we expecting Hayden Hurst to be the guy? Like, I love Donald Parham as much as the next guy, but I know that he has limited upside. I do love Donald Parham because I made a lot of money off of him.
Money last year. Let's keep it real.
Yeah.
Touchdown.
So when I go back to like comparing the 2022 Nico Collins season, where he had his moments and some of the metrics look pretty good for him, what did? They got rid of Brandon Cooks. They moved on from a veteran. That's what the Chargers have done. They moved on from the veterans. They're ready for their younger Josh Palmer, not even 25 years old yet. They're looking for him to step up. Looking at ESPN wide receiver analytics, right? 2022 Nico Collins, 55 grade. Same as Josh Palmer in 2023. Yards per route run, 2022 Nico Collins, 1.9. 1.9, Josh Palmer, yards per route run in 2023, right? Like, again, McConkey entered this conversation. How is that totally different from Tank Dell? He got drafted by the Texans last year. And what do you know? CJ Stroud was good enough to field 2 receivers. Is Justin Herbert good?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he is. So again, if this off, so that's my sell for Josh Palmer.
You know what? It's pretty good. Again, now you're good.
He's also wide receiver 57.
Well, that was going to
also pretty good.
Wide receiver 57. McConkey's wide receiver 44. So you're telling me you're confident that Palmer's the better value of the 2.
Yeah, I think when you're just projecting these 2 receivers, like, yes, again, McConkey. Again, if he is the slot receiver, like, how much is he actually going to be on the field? I mean, look, we saw this with Jaden Reed last year. Like, Jaden Reed had 10 touchdowns, right? But that kind of, was the point where Jaden Reed wasn't playing a full-time role, because that's what happens when you're a slot receiver sometimes. Like, you have high rates of, target per route run is really good, and he ran hot on touchdowns. But if McConkey's not the one scoring the touchdowns, like, is Justin Herbert going to throw like 15 touchdowns this year? Like, I don't think so. Like, he's got to at least throw like 25, and who would be the number 1 guy? It'd probably be Palmer for me.
Yeah. Look, I hate it. You're really making good points today. It's really unsettling. Meaney, give me the last guy on your list here for the undervalued guys who could potentially break out this season.
I actually have a breakout candidate here. I saved my one of my better ones for last. He's not. He ran the show.
Old. He read the show sheet.
Yeah, I read the show sheet. Zamir White of the Raiders here. I think one of the biggest offseason winners with Josh Jacobs going to Green Bay. They drafted a running back in Dylan Lobby, but not until the 6th round. Alexander Madison, I mean, let's be real about him. He's not going to steal too many touches away. So I think also the Raiders had a good draft. I mean, they invested in one of the better run blockers from the draft in Jackson Powers Johnson. I mean, one season as a starter, as a center in college last year, and he won the Remington Award, which is the nation's best, college center. He allowed one pressure. And we have the Raiders as a top 5 offensive line over at FTN. They check a lot of boxes for us over there. And when Antonio Pierce overtook this offense, he showed us that he wants to run the football like a ton. And even when Jacobs was sidelined, it was 4 games. It's a small sample size here, but Zamir White averaged 21 attempts, 99 rushing yards, and 2.5 catches per game over those 4. And I think Gardner Minshew under center, I don't think the offense is going to be awful. Like, I do believe it's going to be him, right? You still got Devontae Adams, a couple 2 tight end sets there with Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer. Like, they're going to run the ball. And Zamir White wasn't super efficient with a lot of those touches last year, but there was a game I watched where Aiden O'Connell didn't even complete a pass in the second half of a football game. So, I mean, what does that tell you, right? Stack boxes. And Josh Jacobs felt those stack boxes last year. So I think that they can move the ball a little bit, which will help him. But ultimately, as a guy, I like to wait on my running backs here with a couple of late round, not so sexy picks. But this guy here is RB24. I can see him having a better season than Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery's in the split backfield, DeAndre Swift. Like, what are we really expecting from Swift? He was just part of the best offensive line in football and one of the better rushing teams last year, and really only gave us RB2 numbers. And I don't think he's a lock for a third down roll goal line work. So I think out of all the backs that are going around Zamir White, like, there's nobody that's going to get as much volume and as much work as him. It kind of reminds me of Rachaad White. When you were talking about Rachaad White earlier, I feel like he could have similar numbers in terms of touches. Like, we don't have 65 grabs, but this guy's going to catch 40 plus balls in this offense, and he's going to be top 10 in terms of rushing attempts. He's going to be there. The volume should be there for him.
As someone like you who fades the running backs early for typically, and are looking for value, I got a lot of Zamir White this year. I tell you right now, it's going to be on a lot of my teams, so I love this one. Erickson, give us one more for the road. Perhaps a running back on this list?
Yep, it's Kendre Miller, New Orleans Saints running back, RB43. So, I mean, I love Kendre Miller as a rookie coming out, and unfortunately he was hurt basically his entire rookie season. I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think that he's going to be the leading rusher for the New Orleans Saints. We saw it in Week 18, his last game that he played last year with Alvin Kamara out, 13 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown. So super efficient. He had 3 red zone carries, and he only played a 36% snap share. So we've seen him play in this offense before with the Saints and be really productive. So again, I just don't want to write him off after a year where he was basically hurt. Like, when I wrote up my Dynasty Targets article that you can find over in the Fantasy Pros draft kit, like, what I was finding was, like, the best buys that you can make in Dynasty at running back are second-year guys that just don't fire in year one. Like, think about if you went out and got Kyren Williams, right? He was, like, free, like, dirt cheap. And what was the rhetoric out of him his rookie year? Oh, the Rams love him. What happened? He got hurt. And we never got to see him play, really. Mm-hmm. So Kendre Miller, again, even in a small sample size, like, he was really good. Like, in Week 18, I think that matters. So Kamara is not getting any younger. Like, Kamara can still catch passes with the best of them when coming out of the backfield. Like, I'm not going to say that Kendre Miller is going to take over that third down role as a pass catcher. But when it comes to rushing, I mean, Kamara is, like, fallen off a cliff. 40th out of 49 qualifying running backs, missed tackles forced per attempt last year. He ranked 4th worst in rushing yards above expectation. Jamal Williams ranked dead last in that category last season. So they're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak. So if Clint Kubiak and his vision of, like, this outside zone, like Kubiak type of system, that could be Kendre Miller. Like, that could be the rushing attack that they really want to employ. And when you look at, okay, well, where is the potential with, like, the red zone usage? Well, look at Alvin Kamara. I mean, he's scored 10 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. Like, I'm not so sure that, like, they're going to just rely on him to be their red zone back as an older running back in between the tackles. Like, that might be Kendre Miller, because we know it's not going to be Jamal Williams. Like, it can't be him because he's dust at this point. So, again, you have a 22-year-old running back against 2 29-year-old running backs that have shown massive deficiencies in rushing. Like, I'm going to push my chips on Kendre Miller. Like, I don't want to be... I was a year too early. That's what I'll say with Kendre Miller. Year too early.
There you go. Sometimes that happens. Year too early, you go back, you double down. Gentlemen, some great names. I like the variance, too. We got some younger players, some middle players in the tier, even an old fart like Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah, there you go. Some old timers in there too for good measure. But who do you think is going to break out this year? Drop your comments below. We love to hear from you here. And Funyuns, if you dust your fingers off first, and then you let us know who your breakouts are potentially in 2024. The guys who are undervalued but really in good situations. where the numbers could exceed expectations and certainly ADP. Again, drop those comments below on the YouTube channel, subscribe to Fantasy Pros, and, of course, ring that bell till it goes ding for notifications. Chris Meaney, always amazing to have you. So great to talk to you, and hopefully we'll talk to you again sooner than later. Andrew Erickson, I talk to you all the time, but still, it never gets old. I still love every minute of it.
Won't be soon. This is my last show.
That's
Till the big day.
Oh, this is it. That's right. And next time you come back,
yeah.
not his last show ever, everybody.
Congrats.
This is his last show as a single man, but I can't even say single man. You've been married for years now. You just haven't filled out the paperwork. But congratulations.
No, I did fill out the paperwork already.
Forget it. Then it's already done. But we'll celebrate you when you return. Who knows? Maybe we'll even send you a bottle of champagne. Meaney, send Erickson a bottle of champagne.
I will.
That'll do it for us. The story of the game goes on. For Chris and Andrew, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.